My name is Melissa Hart. I'm a trauma physician in Portland, Oregon. On Christmas Eve last year, I worked a double shift in the ER. We lost a man who insisted he was just tired. His skin was blue when we brought him in. It was that kind of night. I didn't get home until nearly midnight, exhausted, burnt out, and ready to collapse. But when I opened my front door, I wasn't met with silence. I saw a pair of boots by the door. Not mine. Not my husband's. Emily's. My 16-year-old daughter. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was supposed to be at her grandparents' house for our family's Christmas Eve dinner. It's tradition. She'd begged to drive herself this year, newly licensed and proud. She even left early to be polite. I saw her coat draped across the armrest, her overnight bag still zipped. And there she was, curled up on the couch, asleep in that awkward, tense position like someone who doesn't trust the furniture. I stood there trying to process what I was seeing. What happened? I said her name softly. She opened her eyes like she hadn't really been sleeping. "Hey," I said, "why are you here?" She sat up slowly and said, "They said there wasn't room." I blinked. "Room? Where?" "At the table," she said, her voice cracking. She tried to cover it with a shrug, but it didn't work. "They said they weren't expecting me," she went on, "that there were already too many people. Grandma looked stressed and told me she couldn't pull up another chair last minute." "You got there on time?" I asked. "Right on time," she nodded, but she acted like I'd shown up for the wrong holiday. Then came the excuse, there wasn't a bed left either. They didn't want her driving back late, but also didn't know where to put her. So she left. "Did anyone offer to drive you home?" I asked. She shook her head. "Did you at least eat?" Another shrug. Lila was sitting in my usual spot. Grandpa was talking to her like she was royalty. No one even looked at me. Then she looked down and whispered, "I made toast." I turned toward the kitchen and saw one slice of toast on a paper towel, half a banana next to it. That was her Christmas dinner. Cold, uneaten, slightly bent at the edges. Something in my chest coiled tight. It wasn't anger yet, just that frozen, glassy feeling you get right before something shatters. "I wasn't really hungry," she said quickly, like she could make it easier for me if she downplayed it. Her eyes were starting to fill, but she fought it, blinked hard, bit her lip like she could chew her way through the emotion. She was trying so hard not to make a big deal. "They made it seem like I was being rude," she whispered, like showing up after they'd planned everything was some sort of burden. Then she cried. Quietly, slowly, like a faucet you can't quite turn off. "I was going to bring a pie," she said through a trembling voice, "but I thought they'd already have enough food." I sat down next to her and put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned in immediately like she'd been holding herself upright for too long out of pure willpower. She didn't need to be strong with me. After a while, she wiped her nose on her sleeve and said, "I know they don't really like you, Mom, but I thought I was just the kid, that they wouldn't treat me the same." She looked at me, and I could tell that moment cracked something in her. "They didn't even say it in a mean way," she added. "It was just like a practical thing. Like I was a folding chair they didn't have space for." She looked small, diminished, like someone who finally realized they'd been left out on purpose, not by accident. That night I didn't go to bed. I sat in the kitchen, staring at her bag. She'd packed it so carefully. She picked out the sweater my mom once said she liked. She even brought a little tin of cookies she made herself. We hadn't planned to back up Christmas. Why would we? We trusted them. That's the part one couldn't get over. Not the toast, not the cold house, not even that she drove back alone in the dark. It was that they looked Emily in the eyes, this sweet, awkward, kind-hearted girl who showed up with a smile and homemade cookies, and they told her, "There's no room for you." And they didn't mean space. They meant not you. Wah. The next morning, my husband got home from his shift. Emily was still asleep. I told him what happened. He stood there for a long moment before asking, "So what do we do now?" I didn't answer right away, but I already knew. Because this wasn't just a bad holiday. This wasn't new. So this was the pattern. I've always been the weird one in my family, probably before I even understood the word. When I was 6, I found a dead bird outside and asked if I could dissect it, not out of cruelty, but because I wanted to understand how it worked. My mom slapped the kitchen counter and shouted, "Jesus, Melissa, what's wrong with you?" My sister Rachel screamed and told everyone I was trying to build a zombie. I got grounded for scaring her. That set the tone. I loved anatomy books, asked for a microscope for Christmas, talked about blood flow at dinner, raised my hand too much at school. In my family, being curious meant you were showing off. No one else went to college. Most didn't finish high school on the first try. When I was 12, my dad started joking that I wasn't really his. Too smart to be mine, he'd say, then laugh like it was just harmless. I once overheard him asking my mom if she'd ever cheated on him because I didn't look like anyone else in the family. I never slept well after that, still haven't asked about it. By high school, Rachel had settled into her role as the golden child. She wasn't great at school, but she was funny, loud, and good at spinning her scoops into lovable stories. Everyone adored her. She knew how to cry on cue and made sure everyone knew she looked out for me, the poor, awkward sister who couldn't take a joke. She used to call me Dr. Freak in front of her friends. When I actually became a doctor, she upgraded it to Dr. Moneybags. Progress, I guess. When I got a full scholarship for medical school, there was no celebration, no hug. My mom just asked who I thought would marry me because men don't like women who act smarter than them. I told her maybe I'd marry myself. She didn't laugh. They never gave me a cent. I waited tables through school, took every overnight shift I could get, came home with sore feet and burnout in my bones. Meanwhile, they told people I was living the dream. They never visited, not once. Years later, after my second residency, I finally landed a steady job that paid enough to breathe. I met my husband during a long overnight shift, romantic in a sleep-deprived kind of way. Eventually, we moved into a small home where we could afford more than instant noodles and secondhand furniture. That's when the calls started. Can you help with the electric bill? Can you co-sign this lease? Can you ask a doctor friend about Uncle Dale's back pain? I did what I could, most of it without hesitation. When my parents approached retirement with zero savings, bad credit, and a history of rental evictions, I stepped in. I bought a modest 2-bedroom house and handed them the keys. I told them it was a gift. I'd cover the mortgage, taxes, and maintenance. The house was legally mine, but they could live there like it was theirs. They never paid a cent. I handled the utilities, prescription refills, insurance. Every call, every emergency, I said yes. Until I didn't. A few months before that awful Christmas, Rachel called. Her daughter Lila, the niece who could do no wrong, had been accepted into a prestigious STEM summer camp. "She's got your brain," Rachel said, as if it were a compliment. "This could change her life." "How much is it?" I asked. $1,200, she said quickly. "But it's totally worth it. And you, of all people." That's where I stopped listening. Emily never went to any expensive summer camps. Not because she couldn't eat, she just never asked. She's practical, thoughtful. She wouldn't dream of demanding money like that. I told Rachel no, politely but firmly. I reminded her that I was already covering our parents' house, their medical needs, their day-to-day expenses. "Maybe look into financial aid or a payment plan," I suggested. Her tone flipped like a switch. "Must be nice," she snapped, "to have everything and still be so stingy. She's your niece. You're just jealous because Lila's actually going places." That line stuck with me. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't surprise me at all. 3 weeks later, it was Christmas Eve. Emily was excited. She said she felt grown up being trusted to drive there herself. She packed an overnight bag, wrapped small gifts for the younger cousins, picked out a cardigan Grandma once said she liked. She even made cookies. I reminded her to text me when she got there. She did. Everything seemed fine. Until I walked through the front door late that night and found her curled up on the couch, holding herself like she didn't belong anywhere. She gave me a wobbly smile and said in the smallest voice, "Grandma said there wasn't space. Not at the table, not for a bed, so I came back." She'd counted 28 people there, even a neighbor, but not her. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen staring at her overnight bag, still zipped, untouched. And I thought about every mortgage payment, every medical bill, every just this once request that became permanent, every holiday where I made myself small for the sake of peace. They hadn't run out of chairs, they had run out of decency. And they used my daughter to deliver the message. The next morning, my husband and I got into the car. We didn't speak much on the drive over. His hand rested on my knee, not comforting, not pushing. Just grounding, just present, that was enough. The morning after Christmas always feels heavy, like the world is hung over on sugar and wrapping paper. I was hoping the house would be empty. It wasn't. Rachel's SUV was parked outside, along with another car I didn't recognize. Maybe a cousin staying for leftovers. I rang the doorbell. No one answered. I rang again, knocked, still nothing. "Let's just leave it," my husband said gently. I stood still for a second longer, then nodded. I tucked the envelope under the door frame tightly enough that it wouldn't blow away. I was unlocking the car door when I heard it. The creak of the screen. A slippered footstep. I turned. My mother stepped out, wrapped in that fuzzy robe she always wore on the holidays, the one she bragged about getting for 90% off. She bent down, picked up the envelope, opened it, and began to read. Her face went from blank to pale. Then she screamed. "Frank, get out here. She's throwing us out." My dad appeared in the doorway wearing yesterday's clothes, confused and squinting in the morning light. "What the hell?" he grumbled. Rachel stumbled out behind him, still in her Christmas pajamas, holding a mug like this was all just a cozy misunderstanding. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice groggy with sleep. My mom pointed down the driveway like I was some stray animal that had wandered too close to the porch. "You ungrateful little." We didn't stay to hear the rest. My husband and I got in the car and pulled away. It didn't matter what came next. I already knew the greatest hits by heart. By the time we got home, my phone was buzzing. I ignored the first call, then the second, the third, sixth time I picked up. "How dare you?" my mother shrieked. "No greeting, no pause, not even a fake show of concern for Emily. You've lost your damn mind." I held the phone away from my ear. I could still hear my dad yelling in the background. "If you do this, you're no daughter of ours." Not one of them asked why. Not one of them asked what had happened. Not one of them even mentioned Emily. I hung up. They kept calling. Rachel started texting. One message actually said, "This is going to ruin your reputation. Think of your career." Oh, honey. My patients don't care where my parents live. By that evening, my phone looked like it had gone through a breakup. 32 missed calls, 14 texts, 3 voicemails. One cousin even had the nerve to message me, "Not my place, but this feels extreme. You only get one mom." I didn't reply. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole. Of course, my mother. She stood on my porch in that same fuzzy robe, holding the eviction letter, now crumpled and damp like she'd been squeezing it for hours. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. She didn't wait. "You're really doing this?" she hissed. "After everything we've done for you?" I let that hang for a second. Then I said quietly, "You mean the house I bought for you? The bills I paid? The health insurance I arranged because Medicare wouldn't cover your blood pressure meds?" She flinched for a heartbeat, then straightened. Her eyes went sharp. "We raised you. We gave you everything." "You didn't even let my daughter eat dinner," I said. That shut her up. But not for long. She paused, but only for a moment. Then her voice rose again, high and theatrical. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. We didn't have enough chairs." "There were 28 people there," I said. "Even a neighbor." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I didn't send that letter to be cruel," I added. "But if you think you can treat Emily like she's disposable." "Oh, for God's sake," she snapped, cutting me off. "Stop acting like we're monsters. You're the one tearing this family apart over a misunderstanding. And now you're threatening your own parents." She held up the letter like it was a piece of courtroom evidence, and then, God help me, she ripped it in half. Just stood there and tore it down the center like that would somehow void the legal process. "There," she said, triumphant. "That's done now." And then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "If you want us to forgive you, you'll pay for Lila's science camp and drop this ridiculous tantrum." She smiled like she'd just solved everything, like the solution had been obvious all along. I didn't say a word. Because in that moment, something clicked into place. They had never taken me seriously. Not when I was a kid dissecting frogs in the backyard. Not when I graduated from med school. Not even now, with a title in front of my name and a house in my name. To them, I was still the awkward girl with too many questions. The outsider. The backup plan. They thought I wouldn't follow through. They thought this was just another one of my episodes. They were wrong. So I let her walk off the porch, muttering like the tragic heroine in a drama no one else was watching. And I closed the door quietly, calmly. But in my head, I was already making the next move. 2 mornings later, I met with a lawyer. I laid everything out, every detail. The house deed in my name, the mortgage I'd been paying for 7 years, the utilities, the insurance, the quiet sacrifices no one acknowledged. He didn't flinch. "I assume you want a formal eviction?" he asked, like it was just another Tuesday. I nodded. The notice went out that same week, 60 days, paper stamped, certified mail, signature required. And this time, they couldn't rip it in half and pretend it didn't exist. I kept paying the mortgage, wasn't about to let my credit tank out of spite, but everything else stopped. Cold. No more power, no more cable, no more co-pays or refill requests. They got a crash course in what no support really looks like. 2 weeks later, someone knocked on my door. It was my Aunt Diane, the good aunt, or so I thought. She brought a tin of cookies and a rehearsed expression of concern. "Melissa," she said gently, "I just want to talk." I let her in. We sat in the kitchen. I poured tea. Neither of us touched it. "It just doesn't sound like you," she said after a long pause. "Throwing out your parents over a misunderstanding?" I laughed once, not kindly. Then I told her everything. About the house, the bills, the betrayal on Christmas Eve. How they made room for 28 people, including a neighbor and 2 cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade, but not their own granddaughter. She paled. "I didn't know," she whispered. "They didn't tell you," I corrected. She left with a quiet nod, like someone who had just heard something she couldn't unhear. 3 days later, I got a text from one of my cousins. I didn't understand before, but I do now. 1 week before the eviction deadline, my lawyer called. "They haven't moved," he said. "At all." "Then we proceed," I replied. I listed the house that same day, set a fair price. I wasn't trying to profit, I just wanted closure. A buyer made an offer within days. Families loved that neighborhood. All they wanted was a clean handover and vacant possession. My real estate agent asked if I wanted to be there the day the house was cleared. I said no. The new owners handled everything through proper channels. I heard it wasn't pretty. What came next wasn't much better for them. Rachel took them in. Of course she did. My sister always loved to cosplay the better daughter. She gave interviews to cousins like it was a press tour. She abandoned them, she said, all because of one holiday mix-up. 3 weeks later, she showed up on my doorstep. Eyes bloodshot, hair in a frizzy bun. "I can't do it," she said, without a hello. "They're fighting constantly. Mom says the living room's too small. Dad says my kids are loud. They won't share a bathroom. I'm going insane." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "They need a rental," she said. "You could at least help, just a deposit." "No." She blinked, stunned. "Melissa, you watched my daughter get turned away on Christmas Eve and said nothing. That was your choice. This is mine." Rachel said nothing. She turned and walked back to her car. A week later, she kicked them out too. They ended up in a rental no one brags about. 2 small rooms, 1 faulty heater, a front step that tilted like a shrug. Their combined pension barely covered rent and groceries. Gone were the cruises they'd been planning. Gone were the dinner parties, the holidays filled with judgment dressed as tradition. They tried to call in sympathy from the extended family, claimed I had cut them off without warning, said I was unstable, said I'd always been cold. But by then, I had already quietly sent copies of every bill I'd paid, the mortgage statements, the certified eviction notice, time-stamped and legal. One cousin replied with a single word, "Wow." Another sent a thumbs-up emoji. No one rushed to rescue them. And neither did I. 2 months later, Emily and I sat on the porch, sipping iced tea, no plans, no performance, just peace. She looked over and said, "I don't miss them, you know." "I don't either," I replied. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message, Hope you're proud of what you've done." I deleted it without reading the rest. "They'll probably text again," Emily said. "They always do," I said, "but they're not our problem anymore." And they weren't. They said there was no room for my daughter at the table. Now there's no room left in our lives for cruelty, for control, or for emotional games dressed up as family values. If you've ever had to choose peace over people who made you feel small, this story is for you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away and not look back. Let me know in the comments, did she go too far or just far enough? And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We tell stories here, stories that honor the quiet strength it takes to protect your peace. You're not alone, and you never were.